Marcus Hale chose to be invisible. For 3 years, he wiped down cold glass desks, swapped broken cables, and wore a Navy maintenance uniform at Sterling Aviation. Nobody in the operations room knew the quiet janitor was once a decorated military pilot. But when an experimental aircraft lost flight controls and ground radar displayed corrupted telemetry, the elite engineering team panicked. Marcus set down his brass cleaning tool, stepped past the executive desks, and picked up the transmitter mic into the roaring static. He spoke 6 words. Falcon 27. This is Raven 6. Everything in that room changed today. Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into this deeply moving story of quiet dignity, unsung expertise, and a father's unyielding devotion, please take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Leave a comment below telling us where in the world you are tuning in from today. Grab a warm drink, settle in, and let us begin. Cold rain tapped against the soaring glass facade of Sterling Aviation's main hangar near Boeing Field, leaving distorted streaks that caught the amber glare of dawn. Sterling Aviation was a multi-billion-dollar aerospace conglomerate, a place where pristine marble floors reflected stainless steel beams, and executives walked past glass-walled R&D laboratories. Marcus Hale arrived at 6 o'clock every morning. He wore a faded navy blue twill maintenance shirt with an embroidered patch over his pocket that read M. Hale, Facilities. In his right hand, Marcus carried a heavy steel toolbox painted industrial red. In his left hand, he carried a bright yellow plastic lunchbox decorated with faded stickers, his 10-year-old daughter Sophie's lunch for school. "Did you remember the cut apple slices, Dad?" Sophie had asked earlier at their kitchen table. "Wrapped in foil so they don't turn brown soft," Marcus had replied, smoothing back her dark hair. "Don't leave your backpack on the bus." Sophie had large, observant hazel eyes and her late mother's quiet intelligence. Marcus's wife, Sarah, had passed away 4 years ago from an aggressive autoimmune condition that stripped their savings to bare bone. When Sarah died, Marcus made an unshakable vow. He would build a safe, calm life for their daughter, no matter what pride he had to strip away. Before the gray twill uniform and the red toolbox, Marcus Hale lived in a completely different world. He had held the rank of major in the United States Air Force. For 12 years, Marcus was a flight commander and experimental test pilot attached to tactical transport and special operations squadrons. He had logged over 4,000 flight hours, flying heavy C-130 Hercules aircraft through violent monsoons, navigating mountain passes in pitch darkness, and testing fly-by-wire flight control systems under extreme stress. When he left the service to care for his daughter, Marcus closed the door on his military career. Civilian corporate flight departments wanted constant international travel schedules that conflicted with raising Sophie. So Marcus took the job nobody else competed for: facilities maintenance at Sterling Aviation. It provided reliable health care for Sophie and allowed him to pick her up from school at 4:30 every afternoon without exception. To the engineers and corporate executives, Marcus Hale was simply the maintenance guy. He fixed broken hydraulic hinges, replaced burned-out LED fixtures, and wiped down the glass partitions of Operations Room 3. He preferred it that way. On this Tuesday morning, Marcus set his toolbox down in Operations Room 3. The room was a flight oversight facility featuring a curved wall of ultra-high-definition displays, brushed aluminum consoles, and dedicated communication racks connected to primary roof satellite arrays. Sterling Aviation was preparing for a pivotal day. In less than 3 hours, the company was conducting the final high-altitude flight envelope demonstration for its flagship experimental aircraft, the Falcon 27. The Falcon 27 was equipped with a revolutionary proprietary autonomous flight management architecture designed to sell to the Department of Defense. The company had invested over $80 million into the prototype. If today's flight test succeeded, Sterling would secure a multi-year federal contract. If it failed, 34-year-old CEO Rebecca Sterling would face immediate removal by the board. Marcus pulled a microfiber cloth and cleaner from his belt. He began quietly wiping down the primary glass partition, keeping his eyes down and his presence entirely unremarkable. By 9:15, Operations Room 3 was packed with 25 software engineers, telemetry analysts, and corporate observers. At the center of the upper tier stood Rebecca Sterling. Sharp, precise, and holding degrees from Stanford and Wharton, she wore a tailored navy wool pantsuit. Subtle lines of tension were carved around her dark eyes. Position update on Falcon 27, Rebecca requested, her voice calm and commanding. Falcon 27 is maintaining flight level 180 over the Olympic Mountains, reported Gregson, the chief telemetry lead. Primary turbine metrics are nominal. Autonomous Navigation Architecture version 4.2 is actively managing the flight profile. Pilot status? Rebecca asked. Captain David Vance is in the left seat, Gregson replied. Co-pilot Miller is monitoring systems. The autonomous system is executing the altitude step-down sequence down to 5,000 feet. Suddenly, a sharp chime echoed from the primary telemetry rack. A yellow alert banner flashed across the main wall display. Datalink latency detected. Packet loss 14%. Gregson frowned, tapping his keyboard. Just a minor satellite handoff delay as the aircraft crosses the mountain ridge. 3 seconds later, the yellow banner turned to violet, pulsing red. Primary datalink failure. Bus overflow. Loss of synchronization. The ambient chatter in the room evaporated instantly. What happened? Rebecca asked, her voice dropping into a cold register. The digital telemetry stream just dropped, a junior engineer shouted. We lost primary engine data, airspeed indicators, and elevator positioning. From the overhead radio speakers, high-frequency static burst into the room. A harsh, tearing sound. KZZZZZT. Control. This is Falcon 27. Do you copy? KZZZT. The voice was clipped and distorted, but the underlying tension in the pilot's tone was unmistakable. Gregson grabbed the desk microphone. Falcon 27, this is Sterling Ground Control. We have lost your digital telemetry stream. Recycle your flight control computer software switches. KZZZZZT. Control. Negative on switch recycle. KZZZT. Primary flight display is glitching. We are experiencing uncommanded pitch oscillations. Computer is correcting for phantom altitude errors. What does he mean, phantom altitude errors? Rebecca demanded. Our ground tracking display shows them at 5,300 feet, Gregson said, pointing at the main wall display. KZZZZZT. Control. Barometric altimeter reads 4,800 and dropping. Heavy cloud cover. Zero visual contact. Violent pitch down. KZZZT. They're losing altitude, the engineer yelled. Digital track says 5,300, but pilot says 4,800. Panic crept into the room. Engineers stared frantically at lines of scrolling red code, attempting to debug an $80 million software architecture while the physical aircraft was plunging toward Granite Peaks. Try sending a hard reboot command through the backup satellite channel, Gregson yelled. From the back corner of the room, a low, steady voice cut through the rising hysteria. If you send a hard reboot command right now while that flight computer is in a pitch-down loop, the voice said calmly, you will freeze their elevator actuators in a full negative deflection. They will strike the ridge in under 40 seconds. Every single person in the room froze. 7 engineers, 2 executive vice presidents, and Rebecca Sterling turned their heads toward the back corner. Marcus Hale was standing beside his cleaning cart. He had removed his heavy work gloves and set his tools neatly inside his toolbox. His posture was completely transformed. His feet were set shoulder-width apart. His shoulders were square, and his hazel eyes were locked onto the main flight display with absolute clarity. Gregson's face flushed red. What the hell are you doing? He barked. Facilities. Grab your cart and get out right now. Marcus didn't blink. He stepped smoothly away from his cleaning cart, his heavy leather boots making a firm click against the floor tiles as he moved straight down the center aisle toward the main console. Your ground tracking system is running on a corrupted ARINC 429 data link loop, Marcus stated plainly, his voice gravelly and unhurried. When the Falcon 27 switched to its secondary flight mode, The ground computer started interpreting the transponder pulse sequence as active altitude telemetry. Your screen says 5,300 feet because it's reading a cached digital buffer. The pilot's barometric altimeter reading of 4,800 feet is the real physical altitude. The room was silent. Gregson sputtered, stepping into Marcus's path. How dare you step in here and pretend to understand aerospace architecture? Gregson, shut up, Rebecca Sterling commanded. She stepped around the desk, her sharp hazel eyes fixed entirely on Marcus. She looked at his hands, calm, steady, without a trace of tremor. She looked into his eyes and saw zero hesitation and an absolute, terrifying authority. How do you know the ground display is reading a cached digital buffer? Rebecca asked softly. Marcus stopped 3 feet from her. Because I flew flight test evaluations on early versions of that control architecture 15 years ago for the military. When the primary sensor bus drops below 12 volts under high thermal load, the data link buffers the last valid GPS sentence and repeats it while the analog barometric encoder continues to drop. He glanced at the main display screen. Your pilot is flying blind inside an overcast mountain valley. His flight computer thinks he is 500 feet higher than he actually is, so the autopilot is aggressively pushing the nose down. He is fighting his own automated flight control stick. Rebecca looked at Gregson, whose mouth was hanging open, then looked back at Marcus. You were a pilot, Rebecca stated. Yes, Marcus replied quietly. What branch? Air Force, experimental test and tactical transport. What was your call sign? Rebecca asked. Marcus looked at the secondary analog radio console mounted in the rack. Raven 6, Marcus said. The senior radio operator sitting at the far end let out a gasp. Raven 6? The 41st Rescue Squadron out of Moody. Marcus looked directly into Rebecca's eyes. That aircraft is 30 seconds away from an aerodynamic stall because the pilot is pulling back on the yoke while the computer trims the tail down. If you want those 2 men to live, give me that microphone right now. Gregson stepped forward. Ms. Sterling, this is a massive violation of FAA protocols. Rebecca grabbed the microphone from Gregson's console and extended it straight toward Marcus. He isn't a facility worker right now, Gregson, Rebecca said firmly. He's the only person in this room who knows what's happening. Marcus took the microphone. His hand was motionless. He pressed the transmit bar. Falcon 27, this is Raven 6 on Sterling ground control. Marcus spoke into the mic. His voice was deep, resonant, and carried the undeniable authority of a flight lead commanding a formation through a storm. Confirm you copy Raven 6. For 3 agonizing seconds, the speaker produced nothing but atmospheric static. Then, a breathless voice broke through, strained, but sharp with instant recognition. Raven 6, KZZZT, Falcon 27 receiving. KZZZT, we are losing pitch authority. Autopilot is fighting the yoke. What do we do? Marcus didn't jump or raise his voice. He took a slow breath, creating an island of composure in the center of the panicked room. Falcon 27, listen to my voice carefully, Marcus said. Your flight control computer is operating on corrupted altitude data. I want you to reach down to the center pedestal right now and pull the primary circuit breaker for the autopilot flight director system, breaker Alpha 4. Gregson gasped. If he pulls Alpha 4, he disables the entire automatic stability system. That's the point, Marcus snapped. The computer is the enemy right now. The pilot needs to feel the real air on the control surfaces. Over the radio, Captain Vance's voice crackled back. Breaker Alpha 4. Pulled. Autopilot offline. The loud warning horn screaming in the background of the cockpit died, leaving only the rushing roar of wind. She's heavy in the nose, Vance shouted. Airspeed is dropping through 180 knots. Trim the elevator manually, David, Marcus instructed smoothly, using the pilot's first name to establish direct human contact. Roll your pitch trim will back 3 full turns. Do not pull back violently on the yoke or you will stall. Trim the nose up until control pressure lightens. 5 seconds passed. On the ground tracking screen, the rapid downward trajectory of the aircraft began to flatten out. Airspeed stabilizing at 190 knots. A junior engineer called out. Altitude holding at 4,200 feet. He's cleared the cloud base, Marcus noted. He keyed the mic again. Falcon 27. Do you have visual contact with the terrain? KZZZT. Negative. We broke out between cloud layers. Mountain ridge visible off our left wing tip. Estimate less than 2 miles separation. Acknowledge, Falcon 27, Marcus said calmly. You are inside the Skokomish River Valley. If you maintain 240, the valley narrow boxes in 4 miles. Execute a banking turn to exit back toward the Puget Sound. Rebecca stood right beside Marcus. The winds over that ridge are gusting to 45 knots out of the northwest. If he banks too steeply without automatic roll stabilization, the mountain downdraft will push his left wing down into the trees. Marcus nodded once. Falcon 27, Raven 6, Marcus transmitted. You have a 45-knot crosswind. Increase throttle to 85% command power. Establish a standard rate 15-degree bank to the right, heading 060. Do not exceed 15 degrees of roll. Let the wind push your nose around. 060 rolling right. Vance replied. Easy on the rudder, Marcus coached softly. Hold that nose on the horizon line. You're doing fine, David. Just fly the airplane. For 2 agonizing minutes, nobody in operations room 3 breathed. The only sounds were the steady cadence of Marcus's voice guiding the aircraft degree by degree out of the mountain trap. On the main display, the blue icon completed its curve away from the mountain peaks, vectoring out toward the open gray surface of Puget Sound. Clear of terrain, the radar operator yelled. Falcon 27 is over open water at 4,000 feet. Flight path is stable. Applause erupted from the junior engineers. Marcus didn't join in. He kept his eyes locked on the radio frequency display. At that exact second, the secondary analog radio frequency display flickered once and went completely dark. We lost the analog radio relay, Gregson shouted. The roof antenna shorted out from rain exposure. The main speakers returned to dead silence. The digital network was dead, and the primary roof antenna had suffered a total failure. They're stable over the water, an engineer offered nervously. Can they just fly visual back to Boeing Field? No, Marcus said. Their primary flight displays are still uncalibrated. They don't have active navigational guidance. The cloud ceiling over Seattle is dropping to 800 feet, and they have less than 20 minutes of fuel remaining. Can we patch through the cellular network? Rebecca asked frantically. It will take at least 30 minutes to establish a secure handshake, Gregson admitted. We don't have 30 minutes. Marcus stood motionless, his mind rapidly sifting through the physical architecture of the building. He had spent 3 years maintaining Sterling Aviation's infrastructure. He knew where every wire and conduit ran through the concrete floors. Where is the old emergency civil defense radio cabinet? Marcus asked sharply. What? Gregson asked, bewildered. The legacy 1980s analog copper line VHF base station, Marcus said, his voice hard. This building was constructed over an old aeronautical hangar. There used to be a dedicated, battery-backed emergency transceiver mounted in the basement sub-panel. That equipment hasn't been certified in 15 years, Gregson protested. It's an independent copper wire running directly up the elevator shaft to a hardwired whip antenna on the water tower, Marcus countered. It doesn't run through your software gateways, and it doesn't care about your corrupted digital data. Marcus looked at Rebecca. I need access to the subterranean maintenance vault. I'm coming with you, Rebecca said instantly. They took the emergency staircase down 3 levels into the basement. A world of exposed steel pipes, heavy HVAC ducts, and wet concrete. Marcus marched to a heavy steel electrical cabinet mounted to the far wall. He pulled a brass master key from his ring, inserted it into the rusted padlock, and snapped it open. Inside sat a heavy gray metal box adorned with a rotary frequency dial, a rubber hand microphone, and an analog VU meter. a classic Rockwell Collins VHF base station. Marcus pulled a pair of wire strippers from his toolbox, stripped the corrosion off the ground lead, and flipped the toggle switch to on. A deep hum filled the basement room as vacuum tubes warmed to life. The needle on the analog VU meter kicked to the right, glowing with a warm amber light. Marcus adjusted the dial to frequency 122.80, the Universal Air-to-Air Advisory Channel. He picked up the microphone and pressed the bar. Falcon 27, this is Raven 6 on emergency VHF channel 122.8. If you copy this transmission, rock your wings twice over the water. Rebecca stood beside the concrete pillar, watching a small remote monitoring tablet. On the screen, the sleek silver shape of the Falcon 27 was visible flying 3 miles offshore over the gray waters of the Sound. Slowly, deliberately, the silver aircraft dipped its left wing 20 degrees, leveled out, and then dipped its right wing 20 degrees. "They hear you," Rebecca subtly gasped, a breathless smile breaking across her face. Marcus brought the microphone to his lips. "Good copy, Falcon 27, Marcus transmitted. "I have you visual. I am going to steer you onto the ILS runway 13 right approach path at Boeing Field using visual ground markers. We are going to bring you home manually." Over the small speaker, a clear analog voice crackled back. "Raven 6, loud and clear. Lead the way." For the next 12 minutes, standing in the dim concrete basement, surrounded by exposed pipes, Marcus Hale brought the experimental aircraft down out of the gray clouds. He called out airspeed adjustments, power settings, and flap deployment sequences based on physical memory and atmospheric intuition. At 10:42 a.m., the heavy tires of the Falcon 27 touched down on the rain-slicked asphalt of runway 13 right at Boeing Field, rolling safely down the centerline toward waiting emergency tenders. The silence in the subterranean maintenance room was absolute, save for the hum of the vintage radio's vacuum tubes. Marcus lowered the microphone, hung it carefully on its bracket, and flipped the main toggle switch to OFF. The amber light faded back into darkness. He placed his wire strippers back into his red toolbox and latched the clasps. Rebecca Sterling stood 3 feet away, looking at Marcus Hale with profound awe and curiosity. "You saved 2 lives today, Marcus," Rebecca said quietly. "And you saved this company." "David Vance is a good pilot," Marcus replied. "He kept his head when the screens lied to him." "He kept his head because he trusted your voice," Rebecca corrected. She paused, looking at his faded maintenance shirt. "Why didn't you ever tell us? When you applied 3 years ago? Why didn't you put your military flight record on your resume? You could have been running our flight test operations division." Marcus hesitated. He pulled out his worn leather wallet, opening it to a laminated photograph of a young girl with dark hair and big hazel eyes, holding a plastic trophy. "When I left the Air Force, my wife was dying," Marcus said softly. "I spent 12 years flying dangerous missions and putting the service first. When Sarah passed, I looked at my daughter, and I realized she didn't need a hero who flew rockets. She needed a father who came home every single day at 4:30. He closed his wallet. "If people know you were Raven 6, they expect you to live like Raven 6. They want you traveling to defense expos and living on adrenaline. I didn't want that anymore. I just wanted to be Sophie's dad." Rebecca looked at the photograph, then up into Marcus's tired eyes. Her expression softened completely. "You're a remarkable father, Marcus." "I'm just a guy trying to do his job," Marcus said, hoisting his red toolbox onto his shoulder. "Marcus, wait," Rebecca said firmly. "You are done sweeping floors at Sterling Aviation. As of this moment, I am establishing a new executive position, Director of Flight Safety and Human-Machine Interface Integration." Marcus opened his mouth to decline, but Rebecca raised a hand. "Before you say no," she continued with a faint smile, "you report directly to me. You oversee all emergency flight control protocols so our software never lies to another crew. You get a private corner office on the 4th floor, and your contract explicitly mandates that your workday ends at 4 o'clock sharp every afternoon, so you can pick up Sophie from school." Marcus stood motionless. The heavy weight of financial anxiety that had rested on his shoulders for long years seemed to lift. "Can I keep my toolbox?" Marcus asked with a faint smirk. Rebecca let out a breathless laugh. "Director Hale, you can keep whatever you want." At 4:15 that afternoon, the rain over Seattle had cleared, leaving a washed blue sky over Puget Sound. Marcus pulled his Ford F-150 into the bus loop outside Lincoln Elementary School. He stepped out into the crisp autumn air and leaned against the fender. The heavy wooden double doors of the school swung open, and children poured out onto the sidewalk. Among them, clutching her yellow cartoon lunchbox, was Sophie. The moment her eyes landed on her father, her face lit up with a gap-toothed smile. She ran across the concrete pavement, throwing her arms around Marcus's waist. Marcus leaned down, lifting her easily into his arms. "How was your day, Soph?" Marcus asked, kissing the top of her head. "It was okay," Sophie said, pulling back. She noticed that his navy shirt was clean, and he didn't smell like floor wax. He smelled like crisp air and fresh rain. "Dad, did you do something special at work today?" Marcus looked up at the clear blue sky in the distance, where a silver aircraft sat safely parked on the ramp. He smiled, a real, deep smile that reached his eyes. "No, sweet pea," Marcus whispered, setting her gently into the truck. "I just helped someone listen to the right information." He closed her door, walked around to the driver's side, and got behind the wheel. Not as an invisible janitor, and not as a decorated military pilot, but as a father who was right where he was supposed to be. What an extraordinary story of quiet resilience, fatherly sacrifice, and ultimate redemption. Marcus Hale proved that true authority and expertise don't require an expensive suit or a flashy title. They are carried quietly by those who have faced life's greatest storms and choose to use their strength to protect others. If Marcus's journey touched your heart today, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of what true strength looks like, and subscribe to our channel for more deeply human stories. What was your favorite moment in Marcus's story? Drop a comment below. We read and reply to every single one. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next story.